At Pepperdine, you'll not only see policy differently, you'll see your future differently from here too.
Before getting into my introductory remarks, it's worth pausing to reflect that tonight marks one of the first major public events on this campus, following 3 of the toughest weeks in Pepperdine's 80-year history. Beginning with the senseless murder of Seaver student Elena Housley and 11 other innocents at the Borderline Bar, our community had barely a day to grieve before fires rampaged over the Santa Monica Mountains, burning a black ring around this, America's most beautiful college campus. While the campus held a moving remembrance service for Elena just this morning, please join me in a moment of silence for her and the others whose lives were taken from them in such a horrific tragedy. Thank you. We are able to assemble here tonight because of the courage displayed by the LA County Fire Department and the wise planning and quick decision-making of Pepperdine's leadership, including President Benton, Provost Rick Mars, Executive Vice President Gary Hansen, Vice President Phil Phillips, Vice President of Student Affairs Connie Horton, Chief Marketing Officer Rick Gibson, and others. I know several of you are joining us here tonight, so please accept our applause for your incredible service. We are also here on this night because of the gracious support of Dr. Gus Tagliaferri, who endowed this distinguished lecture series in the name of his dear late wife, Patricia. Gus experienced a terrible fall several weeks ago, and in visiting him in the hospital shortly thereafter, I had the unique experience of actually being more encouraged by the person I was visiting than thinking that I might be encouraging him. To know Gus is to know someone with a tremendous spirit, but also a tremendous intellect. And while he's not able to join us tonight, I told him yesterday by phone that the important thing was not having him here tonight, but having him here for the next 20 Tagliaferri lectures. Still, we are fortunate to be joined by several members of the Tagliaferri family, including Gus's brother Ed and his wife Ronnie, and other family members. Please join me in welcoming them. The central theme of the Patricia Tagliaferri lecture series is that in the midst of our polarized era, politically and culturally, the great ideas remain our touchstone in times of trouble, ones that should inform and prepare our public leaders. For the lecture to be hosted by the School of Public Policy is natural, since over the last 2 decades, what has set this school apart from the 200 or so other graduate policy programs has been this balanced approach to leadership education, studying the importance of these timeless truths offered by Scripture, history, and the great thinkers, alongside coursework and the latest techniques in quantitative policy analysis. This has always been so. In a speech given just prior to the opening of this school in 1997, the great historian of California, the late Kevin Starr, described the importance of this new graduate program in this way, and I quote, "Because Pepperdine remains anchored in values, it can communicate itself to the nation as seeking not just numbers and statistics, not just fancy formulations, but value in public life. By which I mean both religious and philosophic value, the philosophia perennis, the perennial philosophy, and the Judeo-Christian tradition, which has shaped our civilization." Starr concluded, "It is only rarely that academic discourse directly refers to these values, yet they remain implicit in what is being thought and said," unquote. What we are doing tonight is what the School of Public Policy has been doing for over 20 years, discussing that perennial philosophy that Judeo-Christian tradition which has shaped our civilization, and by so doing, preparing public leaders in government, nonprofits, and the private sector. And tonight, during what feels, frankly, like a fragile time on this campus, we need to hear those truths again. What better night, then, to be learning about one of the greatest texts in that Judeo-Christian tradition, the book of Exodus, from one of its great teachers, Dennis Prager. As many of you know, Dennis is the host of a nationally syndicated radio show on the Salem radio networks, heard by over 2 million listeners weekly. He is the co-founder of the nonprofit PragerU, providing concise 5-minute video seminars on a variety of policy and history-related topics. In 2017 alone, PragerU videos had over 500 million views. But the honor he holds most highly, I'm sure, is the honorary doctorate he received here at Pepperdine in 1997. For over 4 decades, Dennis has had a passion for the Torah, the Bible's first 5 books. In fact, what first brought Dennis out to California from his native Brooklyn in 1976 was his appointment as director of the Brandeis Bardin Institute, a Jewish educational center. Tonight, we will hear from Dennis as he discusses his latest book, a commentary on the book of Exodus from his new Rational Bible series, subtitled God, Slavery, and Freedom. The format for these lectures begins with Dennis's remarks, followed by question and answer from you all, written out on 3x5 cards, which we will be supplying. Please join me in welcoming back to Pepperdine our fall 2018 Patricia Tagliaferri Distinguished Lecturer, Dennis Prager.
Thank you. Thank you, Dean Peterson. Hi, everybody. That was a very beautiful introduction. They're not all beautiful. University of Colorado many years ago, at Boulder, a young woman got up to introduce me. She announced immediately this was her first time speaking publicly, which became apparent rapidly. She read from a simple bio in which it said, among other things, the Los Angeles Times said, Mr. Prager is a moral thinker obsessed with right and wrong. And no, that was legit. But she read it as obsessed with doing wrong. And I remember thinking, how does she know? It's a very perceptive Freudian introduction that I received that night. Well, Dean, it is true. I am very proud of my honorary doctorate here. It's obvious because it's listed in my official biography, so I am proud. So, my friends, this is a big subject. It's a big deal that a school of public policy invites somebody to talk about the Bible. The universities of the United States are overwhelmingly secular. They're dogmatically secular, and that's why most of them teach a lot of nonsense. I don't say this with any joy. I want to make clear, to this day, the word professor is a holy word in my brain. But it's been defaced, unfortunately. I wrote a column years ago about one of the most important moments of my life when I was a graduate student at Columbia University at its School of International Affairs. And I walked around the campus one day, and I was really going crazy. This was the early 70s, the height of all the nonsense that we're still living through. I was told men and women are basically the same. United States and the Soviet Union were basically the same, 2 superpowers just caught in a bottle like scorpions. But there was no moral difference between Israel and its enemies. I was also at the Middle East Institute and the Russian Institute. So I was going crazy because I am overwhelmed by wanting to know why. Just like when I was a little kid. Why? Why is there so little wisdom here? Why are bright people teaching me foolishness? And a verse came to my mind in Hebrew, because I had studied in yeshiva till I was 18. Yeshiva is half day in Hebrew, Jewish religious subjects, half day in English secular subjects. And one of the prayers we said in first grade as we entered the school was from the Bible. And of course, we'd say it in Hebrew, and it came into my brain in Hebrew, and it is the verse from the Bible, wisdom begins with a fear of God. And then this was the great epiphany of my life. I mean, I've come to a lot of realizations about things, but this was the greatest. And I realized there is no wisdom at Columbia because there's no God at Columbia. And I am prepared to defend that at Columbia. And by the way, I did. I went back to Columbia last year and spoke on how I found God at Columbia, which is the truth. I did. It was that revealing to me. Why is there no wisdom at most universities? There is no God at most universities. There are knowledgeable people who are godless, but I don't know any wise people who are godless. To be honest, I just don't. I don't know what their books are. I would like to know. Show me the godless wisdom being written today in the New York Times, in the Washington Post, in books. Where there are wonderful histories where, if you want to know every detail about Andrew Jackson, I just read a 800-page biography on Jackson, and I learned a great deal. But again, I don't know if that author, I don't know obviously whether he affirms a God and religion, but I'm telling you this is the source of the problem. Atheists should care about this. Atheists should study the Bible. I'm reading now a 1,000-page biography of Winston Churchill. Churchill was not a religious man at all. But in his letters to his wife, he cites the Bible. Because it was assumed everyone knew what you were talking about. To Churchill, I don't even know maybe Churchill was an atheist. I have no idea. But it doesn't matter to me if you're an atheist. It matters to me whether you understand how important the Bible is. What you personally believe is your business. What you consider important for society to study is my business. And they're ignorant. I truly believe, I want to do such a test. I think it would not apply here at Pepperdine, but I would like, at a regular, so to speak, university, I would like to test 100 kids off the street, as it were, in the middle of campus, and just say, who were Cain and Abel? I believe that half of America's college students from Harvard to Montana State could not identify Cain and Abel. That's pretty bad. I'm not asking them, who is Keturah, which you don't even know. That was Abraham's wife after Sarah. But whether she was a concubine or a wife is a debatable issue. And I'm not getting into it. First of all, it's in Genesis, and I'm here to talk about Exodus. But my point is, this is not an obscure question. Who were Cain and Abel? This is a crisis. This is the root. The Bible-free America is the root of the problem, in my opinion. I'll give you an example of the war on the Bible. Alaska Airlines, till about 10 years ago, would put a card on your tray when they still served meals in coach. Some of you may recall that. Students here will not recall that. Their lunch was served, dinner was served for free. They didn't charge for luggage. And we rode horses as well at that time. They would put on your tray a little card with a verse from somewhere in the Bible. There was so much acrimony caused by this, such hostility to Alaska Airlines, they stopped. A friend of mine very recently made an interesting point. If they cited the Quran, not only would it be okay, if you opposed it, you would be called an Islamophobe. But there's no such thing as a bibliophobe. There's no such thing as a Christianophobe. Isn't that amazing? The only group that doesn't have haters are Christians. In the whole wide world, every group If you're anti-black, you're a racist. If you're anti-Hispanic, you're a xenophobe. If you're anti-Jewish, you're an anti-Semite, right? If you're anti-gay, you're a homophobe, right? But if you're anti-Christian, it means you have a PhD. And this is a Jew talking to you, by the way. So I'm very open, as you probably know. Anyone who's heard me, I'm really open. And it's a risk, but it's generally a good thing. So you'll get a kick out of this, especially those of you who are Christian. One very prominent Christian on an airplane flight, on a private plane, across the country. So there was a lot of time to talk. Very deeply committed evangelical Christian. And we're talking theology. Finally, he looked at me and said, Dennis, the truth is, we'd love you to come to Christ. But the truth is, you're far more valuable to us as a Jew. He's right. He's absolutely right. I defend Christians all the time, and then you have no idea how often you will see in the comment section, oh, well, no wonder this guy says he's a Christian. And then the next comment is, actually, he's a Jew. And then the guy never says, oh, I'm sorry, or I made a mistake, or whatever. But it's very simple to me. The end of the Bible and the end of Christianity mean the end of America. Not because God will punish us. I'm a completely rational believer. Okay, when God gave out mystical abilities, I was in another line. I know that. My belief is completely rational. God will not punish the United States for de-bibliizing or de-godizing. It's a self-inflicted punishment. God doesn't have to do a damn thing. Okay? I am certain, because we see it today. We see it before us. So I want to do something with this rational Bible. It's 5 volumes on the first 5 volumes of the Bible, to Jews known as the Torah, and which are seminal. The first 5 books, even to Christians. You read Christian commentators, they will acknowledge, they're primus inter pares. They're first among equals. All books of the Bible are important, but the first 5 set everything. I mean, it's where the 10 Commandments is. That's where the creation of the world is. I mean, this is where it's at. So I know that most people don't really get it, and I don't blame them. It's like I can't read Shakespeare without somebody explaining Shakespeare. And I speak English well, but I don't speak 16th century, 17th century English, 16th century English. I don't. In fact, I envy my friends of other countries who get to read Shakespeare in their language. We don't. That's the amazing thing. English-speaking people don't get a chance to read Shakespeare in their own language. So so I'm blessed. I know Hebrew pretty much like English, and I am one of the rare human beings who loves grammar. So I really, really have a mastery of biblical Hebrew grammar, which is more important even than vocabulary, because you could always look up a word. But grammar helps you understand what is going on, especially with Hebrew, where there are no vowels in the original text, so they're supplied later, and it's a very interesting issue. But I want to make this real for people. This is the source of my values. By the way, it's another question I love asking people. I say, look, you know what? I admit, I get my values from the Bible. Where do you get your values from? Ask a secular person in your family. You all have secular people in your family. It's a given. So just not in an aggressive way, in a curiosity way. So I admit it. You could see, for whatever it's worth, I get my values from the Bible. I'm curious, where do you get yours from? I've done this on the radio. If you don't get your values from the Bible, where do you get it from? And you have no idea how vapid the responses are. They are, from human experience. What does that mean? You get your values from human experience? What are you talking about? Or where even, forget, not just value, where do you get your wisdom from? Where do you get, it's not even a question that is grappled with on most campuses. There is no wisdom. So the question, where do you get wisdom from? I mean, it is the antithesis of wisdom that there is no such thing as male and female. I mean, think about it. And they accuse their opponents of being anti-science, right? So let's be clear. You can have a vagina, breasts, menstruate, produce eggs, have ovaries, and have the proper chromosomes, but you're not necessarily a woman. That's mind-blowing. And to even state what I have just stated, like this girl at Berkeley, she's reviled. I had her on my radio show today. Isabella Chow, I believe her name is. She's Filipino and Asian. So you'd think she would. I mean, she has a lot going for her. Female, Filipino, and East Asian. I mean, so that's. But it doesn't matter. It's like my friend Larry Elder. You would think, he's black. He gets a free pass. No, he doesn't, because he doesn't say what the left wants him to say. All right. So my desire is to show that it is the greatest book ever written, and to explain the first 5 books. So this is the School of Public Policy, and they told me, applying this to America and to modern life. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to give you as many lessons from Exodus, just Exodus, but I will give you one from Genesis because it's relevant to a controversy that took place here at Pepperdine, and that was with regard to Christopher Columbus's statue. And I will tell you, how do I form my opinion on statues of Confederate soldiers, or on judging, Winston Churchill, the Scott Kelly, the astronaut. He tweeted out, as the great 20th century leader Winston Churchill said, in Victory, Show Magnanimity, he was trying to unite Americans with a sweet tweet. He was so blasted by leftists for quoting Churchill and saying he was one of the great men of the 20th century that he tweeted immediately afterwards, "I am so sorry, I did not know all about his racism, and now I will study what a racist Churchill was." Nobody who lived before the left is a good human being. There are no good human beings. It's an amazing thing. Well, maybe Lenin, but aside from that, there are no good. It is an Übermensch philosophy of life. We are morally superior to all those who lived before us. I'll tell you exactly how I approach past figures. And it is 100% taught to me by the Bible. It's the only lesson I'm going to give to you that isn't from Exodus, but it's relevant, very relevant, so I'm using it. Noah is saved by God. The only person saved is Noah and his family. Why is Noah saved? Because now here is I'm going to directly translate from the Hebrew. Because he was a simple, good man or righteous man in his generations. When I was in 3rd grade and learned this, I learned that in the Talmud, the rabbinic exegesis on the Bible and Jewish law and philosophy, they asked a very good question. By the way, this is how I learned to read texts. I do it to this day. When I read an internet article, I do it. Why does it say this when it could have said this? It is a brilliant way to study text. So the question was asked by the rabbis of the Talmud, why does it say Noah was a righteous man in his generations? Why doesn't it just say he was a righteous man? God saved him because he was a righteous man. And the answer to me is obvious, because in later generations, he wouldn't have been such a great guy. But you don't judge people by later generations. You judge them in their generation. What I just told you is called wisdom, not because I said it. I got it from something else. But there is no wisdom in our secular university world. So they don't know this. They think you judge everybody who lived before you by the exact standards of your day, but then nobody passes. There were no good people. Only they are the enlightened. So some arrogant kid at Yale is morally superior to Churchill. Get it? Churchill only saved the Western world from Hitler, which is remarkable for a racist. I guess, why didn't he like that racist? If he was a racist, why wasn't he pro-Hitler? But this is how people don't get wise, because they don't have an answer to the question. I just read a biography of Christopher Columbus, did a lot of awful things. Right, that's true. In his day, was he awfuler than others? I don't think so. And he made it possible for human rights to come to the Western Hemisphere. It's not, I mean, he didn't do it intentionally, but as a result of him, it happened. And by the way, just to be clear, there's a statue of Peter Stuyvesant up in Manhattan. Peter Stuyvesant, the first mayor or governor of New Amsterdam, as it was called. The guy everybody knows, everyone knows. I even knew it as a kid. He was an anti-Semite. I don't want a statue taken down. He was the first governor of Manhattan. He deserves a statue. If you want to learn that he was an anti-Semite, I listened to Wagner's music. Wagner was a racist anti-Semite. His music brings me to tears. I can separate Wagner and his music. Should we burn Wagner? Why don't we stop playing Wagner? If we're going to take down Christopher Columbus, we got to take down Wagner. How could the LA Philharmonic play a racist? Hitler loved Wagner for his racism. But what I've just asked is so many light years in wisdom ahead of where they all are, because they don't know anything. They are the know-nothings. And they know nothing in large measure because they don't know the Bible. That's just the way it is. Lincoln very rarely went to church. He had one book on his nightstand his whole life, the Bible. That's how you raised kids, the moral lessons of the Bible. Okay, so when Genesis comes out, I hope you'll have me back. This is like a tryout, I was told. If you're good tonight, maybe we'll have you for Leviticus. Nobody knows what Leviticus is, so maybe no one will show up, but it's a risk. Hey, I'll tell you something, just by the way. So listen to this. I'm not saying to brag. I never brag because it's not of interest to me to brag. But I also don't deny what happens in my life. So to my utter and total and absolute shock, the book was the #1 nonfiction bestseller in the United States when it came out. This book. I'm a Bible commentary, you understand? It's like, am I seeing things right? It doesn't make sense. It's just been doing magnificently in terms of sales, and if you read the Amazon reviews, in terms of changing people's lives, which is what I wrote it for. Nobody writes Bible commentaries to get rich. Proof. I'm going to do a volume on Leviticus. Do you understand that? Now, let me tell you something. If that volume is a bestseller, I will smile as I leave this planet. I wrote a bestseller on Leviticus. This has never happened since Leviticus was written. You have to understand. It wasn't a bestseller when they wrote it. Okay? So this is like my aim, my ultimate aim. Oh, yeah. Oh, what are you reading? Leviticus. They think it's a recipe. Leviticus Parmesan. Okay. So here's a bunch of lessons from Exodus to apply to society. No order of importance. Okay? Just here goes. Commandment number 6 does not say do not kill. This is understandable that that's the King James translation. It says do not murder. Those of you who listen to me regularly know I've talked about this. This is an extremely important point. If it said do not kill, Hebrew, like English, has 2 words for homicide. Kill and murder. Murder is immoral killing, and only of a human being. If somebody said to you, there were a bunch of mosquitoes in the house and I murdered them, you would say, huh? Unless you were in PETA, in which case you would say that is murder, and you should go to prison, because PETA does believe insects and humans are on similar planes. That's the ultimate consequence of secularism, People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals, which, by the way, had a program called Holocaust on Your Plate, and the program is, you could look it up, it still exists at PETA, that the barbecuing of billions of chickens is the moral equivalent to the cremating of millions of Jews. That is the position of People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals, to which many Jews contribute, because many of my fellow Jews are leftists in their religion. That's their religion. Judaism is their ethnicity, and leftism is their religion, somewhat like the Pope, whose theology is Catholic and whose values are leftist. It's not only unique to Jews, unfortunately. So, it says, do not murder. You are allowed to kill. You are not allowed to murder. And therefore, the pacifist argument that the commandment says, do not kill, it's just false. It doesn't say that. Hebrew, as I said, has two words, just like English does, for taking a life. And you are allowed to take a life in self-defense, to defend other innocents, to execute a premeditated murderer, but you are not allowed to murder, which is immoral killing. There's moral killing and immoral killing. Number 2, in the beginning of the Ten Commandments, it says God spoke all of these words saying. It makes it clear the commandments come from God, not from Moses. The text itself makes it clear. Because if God is not the author and Moses is, you have the very easy out, right? Why should I listen to Moses? Okay? He's no better than me, and even if he was better in those days, he's not better than me today. He never went to college. How bright could he be? And therefore, this is how people would think. God is the source of do not murder. I have a video out at Prager University, our 5-minute videos. If God did not declare murder wrong, it is not wrong. That's, by the way, every atheist philosopher I ever read acknowledged that. If God is not the source of morality, morality is relative. The only way that you can have an absolute right and wrong is if there is a transcendent source for it. Just like the Declaration of Independence. Inalienable rights come from the Creator. If they came from the government or from man, then man can undo them. Only if God is the source of these inalienable rights can we speak of them being inalienable. But this drives people crazy. You should read the comments on the videos. Thousands and thousands of comments on how stupid Prager is. I guess Prager would kill if he didn't believe God said do not kill or do not murder. That's the great argument that they have. It's a good thing Prager believes in God, or he'd be going around murdering. It sounds powerful to them because they went to college. So they don't understand. Of course, if God doesn't say murder is wrong, who does? Your feelings, your conscience, your government, your friends, your society, the New York Times editorial page? I mean, who says it? Okay, so that's number 2. God is the source of morality. Number 3, there is a great verse in Exodus, which is part of the reason the left loathes the Bible, and that is, do not favor the poor in judgment. It's like the antidote to leftism in one verse. Justice must be gender-free, class-free, ethnicity-free. There is only one justice based on the truth of the conditions. If a millionaire is in court with a pauper, your heart goes out to the pauper, and the millionaire won't miss his $100. Let's say it's a very chintzy millionaire and he has sued a poor guy for $100. The left-wing view is, hey, what's $100 to a billionaire or a millionaire? It's a great deal of money to this guy. So this is social justice. The Bible isn't interested in social justice. It's interested in justice. Social justice is a fraud. Whenever you add an adjective to a good noun, you have raped the noun of its meaning. It's like there's democracy, and then there's people's democracy, right? Democracy is very nice. People's democracy means totalitarian regimes. just one word, has ruined it. Social justice has nothing to do with justice. It has to do with fairness, maybe, and they're right. It isn't fair that the rich guy wins in court against the poor guy. It's true, but it's just. There's only one noun duplicated in the first 5 books in the Torah, and that is the word justice. Justice, justice shall thou pursue. It's in Deuteronomy. That's what you have to run after, justice. There is no concept. Even the word social justice is it's a brand new theme. And it means whatever we want it to mean. It means we bend justice. Do not favor the poor in judgment. Number 4. Freedom is a value, not an instinct. People do not yearn to be free. People yearn to be taken care of. America is an aberration because it valued freedom more than being taken care of. The left is much more consonant with human nature in this regard. That's why it's popular all over the world, because people don't want to be free nearly as much as they want to be taken care of. And how do you know that? What's the first thing the Hebrews, the Israelites, the Jews do after leaving Egypt? Complain. Much of the Hebrew Bible is about Jews complaining. By the way, just parenthetically, it is the reason I believe the Torah is divine, because no Jew would have written how bad the Jews were. Oh, I'm 100% sincere about that. It sounds funny, but I'm 100% serious. There is no other Bible on earth where its protagonists are negatively portrayed. The Jews come off pretty awfully in the Jewish Bible. No Jew would have written that. No Greek would have written about bad Greeks. It's not no Jew would have. Nobody would have. People don't do that. This is the single biggest reason I believe in its authenticity. God is the hero, not the Jews. It's a big deal. Very big deal. So they come out of Egypt, and then they immediately start screaming at Moses, "Take us back to Egypt. We ate better there." They did. They might have eaten better there. They had this, very tasteless manna, although we were not taught that in yeshiva. I'll never forget, in like 4th grade, I perked up when the rabbi said, so the rabbis asked, what did manna taste like? And the answer is whatever you wanted it to taste like. It was a miracle of the Lord. And I thought, oh, that's a great deal. Now, I don't know why they're complaining. And I remember thinking, holy crow, like if a pastrami on rye in the desert? This is like great. I envied them. Then I realized it was a legend. It's not in the Bible that it tasted any way you wanted, so it might have been boring. But they preferred, that's what they say, we had flesh, we had meat in Egypt. Bring us back. It's like the left. They tell that my whole life I heard this. Oh, there is a 100% literacy rate in Cuba. And I'm thinking, so what? I'd rather be illiterate and free than in a totalitarian state and literate. If all I could read is Marx, Lenin, and Castro, I'd rather not read. That's it. No, I'm not. It's so obvious to me. Oh, they have free health care. So did slaves. Slaves had free health care. No slave owner wanted his slaves to die. It was a lost investment. Free health care, like that is the summum bonum of society, free health care. There's free health care in Cuba. Not much of it, but it exists. So this is what turns them on. That's why they could celebrate such a monster like Fidel Castro. Anyway, America was founded on values, not human instincts. And liberty is a value. Remember, there's an American trinity, as I've dubbed it. It's on every coin. Liberty, e pluribus unum, in God we trust. No other country has such a trinity. It's the American trinity. I have a book on it. It's still the best hope. And this is what we have as a value. Liberty is a value. Everything is a value. Marriage is a value. Love and marriage go together like a horse and carriage isn't true. Love and marriage go together in societies that announce love and marriage go together. But if you don't announce love and marriage go together, then they don't go together. Everything is a value, everything, except for human instincts. Like sex, that's not a value. What you do with sex is a value, but sex isn't a value, it's human instinct. And the Bible is there to give you values. That is why the Liberty Bell cites a verse from the Torah. Jews don't know this and Christians don't know this. Other than that, it's very well known. A verse from, guess where? Leviticus. That shows the founders were awesome. That they knew the Bible so well, they even knew Leviticus. Yes, you shall proclaim liberty throughout the land to all its inhabitants. From chapter 25 in Leviticus. They knew it's a value. Liberty's a value, and it's not a left-wing value. It isn't. Equality is, or so they claim, but not liberty. And I got this in, 8th grade, 7th grade. I got this. The Jews that left Egypt didn't value liberty. They valued eating better. Take us back to Egypt. Isn't that amazing? Next, what did I give you? 1, 2, 3, 4. This is 5. You don't have to love your parents. It's a biblical principle. Yeah. It's a commandment to love your neighbor. There's a commandment to love God. There's a commandment to love the stranger. There's no commandment to love your parents. There's only a commandment to honor your parents. Parents have a unique position in the Bible. Unique. First of all, they're the only humans you're told to honor. You're not told to honor kings. You're not told to honor anyone. Just your parents. But you don't have to love them, which is very liberating because a lot of people have ambivalence toward their parents. But even if you're ambivalent, you still have to honor them. In America today, I'll prove it to you. I don't know you, and I'll bet most of you are conservative. Nevertheless, I'll take a gamble. I want you to raise your hand, think for a moment. You don't have to be embarrassed because I'm not asking if this is true in your family. I'm only asking you if you know of any family where an adult child does not speak to a parent. Raise your hand. Please raise their hand high. I want everybody to look around the room. Okay? So is that about half, at least half of you? Okay. That's the result I get everywhere. It's a crisis in the United States. It is an epidemic of adult children who won't speak to a parent because they're angry with them. This is relatively new. 50 years ago, half a room would not have raised their hand. They would have wondered why the speaker even asked the question. Gee, I know kids who don't get along with their parents, but of course they talk to them. They don't in America today because we have substituted therapy for morality. They go to a therapist. The therapist tells them, no, there's no reason for you to talk to your mother. I hear your anger. I've done this on radio. I have this massive advantage, and I admit it. I'm the only Bible commentator to speak to millions of people for 30 years. Okay? That I can say with certitude. I have learned so much. I have a society as an audience. I have a society with feedback. A woman called up. I said, call me up if you don't talk to your parent. I mean, who gets to do that? So the lines light up like a Christmas tree. And so I remember this woman calls up. I don't remember her name, and I wouldn't tell it to you anyway. But, I mean, I don't know their last name, so it's irrelevant. And she said, I said, how old are you? She said, 25. I said, you don't speak to whom? I said, I don't speak to my mother. At all? At all. I said, I'm just curious. Did your mother abuse you? Did she sexually abuse you? Did she physically abuse you? Did she humiliate you? I said, no, on the contrary. She loved me. I said, I'm missing something here. Your mother loved you, and you don't talk to her? That's right. I said, may I ask why? So she said, because my mother is a domineering personality, and if I let her back in my life, she would dominate it. So I said, well, isn't the answer to ignore her domination rather than act like you're dead to your mother who loved you? And then I said, I'm just curious, have you seen a therapist? She said, yes. Does your therapist agree? Absolutely. I knew the answer. My next question would have been, was your therapist a female? Because I would bet 2 to 1 that the therapist was. If you want to ask me during Q&A why I said that, it doesn't emanate from misogyny. It actually emanates from a realization that both sexes have big issues to deal with, but we don't recognize that women have any issues to deal with. It's part of the problem in our society. We teach boys how to control themselves, but not girls. So many girls have gone nuts. And they have allowed empathy and nurturing to overwhelm reason. And it's just evil not to talk to your parent. It just is. And I only know that because the Bible tells me that. I have to honor my parent even if I don't like them. And I begin my introduction, and it's a very long introduction, and I even have on the first page of chapter 1, please read the introduction so you'll know what I'm trying to do with this commentary. And I open up the introduction with an autobiographical statement. In my early 20s, I had ambivalence toward my parents. I had what many people have, anger and unresolved issues and so on. I always called my parents. I left their home at 21. I called them every week until they died. My mother at 89, my father at 96. Anywhere I was on earth, I called my parents. I did so because I believed that God said to me, honor your father and mother. That is the only reason I called them when I was ambivalent about them. And thank God I did, for their sake and for my sake. Because gradually it wasn't because God said so, it's because I just thought it was the right thing to do, and I wanted to say hello to my parents. These cases that you all raised your hand about, in 90% of the cases, the kid is secular. The notion that God demands that they honor their parents even if they're angry at them never dawned on them because they're told, follow your heart. Now, it happens not to be in Exodus, so I'm not going to comment on it, how often the Torah and the Bible tell you not to follow your heart. That alone is the antithesis of leftism. You don't follow your heart. So we don't have to love our parents, we have to honor them. Not only that, it's the only one of the 10 commandments that specifies as a reward. Isn't that something? So that you will live long on the land that I bring you to. In other words, a society where children do not honor parents won't survive. That is the case. The first thing totalitarian states do is break the child-parent authority connection. Hitler Youth, Komsomol, and it's now happening in the United States. Parents don't have to okay if their 16-year-old wants her breasts removed. 16-year-old girls in Britain are getting double mastectomies because they think they're boys. And the parents don't know about it. Because the authorities say you don't have to tell a parent if the child wants to have her breasts removed if she thinks she's a boy. Okay. Number whatever. I have 3 more. The worst sin. Some of you may remember my first radio show was not national. It was in L.A., and it was called Religion on the Line. I was the moderator. I had a priest, minister, rabbi, different ones each week. And eventually I had representatives of every religion on earth. The only ones who never came were Jehovah's Witnesses. They were invited, but just didn't work out. But I had every religion on earth. Representatives came. I learned an immense amount. It was one of the greatest 10 years of my life in many ways. And it's part of the reason I really did. I ended up loving America's Christians. That's when I had the beginning of a love affair that still endures. And I would begin the show every Sunday night, a 2-hour show, no ads, and I would begin with a topic. So I remember in the 10 years, maybe once, well, more than once, maybe twice or 3 times, I would go around the room. I'd say, according to you and your religion, what is the worst sin? And a lot of clergy have not thought about that. It's an interesting question. So people had all sorts of answers, blaspheming the Holy Spirit and a whole host of answers that I don't recall. But I knew what I believe is biblical for what is the worst sin, and that is, it's in the commandment, do not take God's name in vain, it says, because he will not forgive whoever takes his name in vain. There's no other commandment, no other sin God says he won't forgive. Most Christians think that do not take God's name in vain means don't say, oh God, unless it's in prayer or something sacred. But I always knew that that didn't make sense. God will forgive murder, but he won't forgive if you say, oh my God, did you see that home run? That he won't forgive? God is not a dummy. In fact, you want to know my most heretical belief? Here it is. God has common sense. This drives a lot of religious people crazy. They think they have common sense, but God doesn't. God does. God is not going to not forgive. God is going to not be in a position of forgiving murder, but not forgiving, oh God, what a tough day at the office. Please. You have no idea how many emails in the course of my life I've gotten. Dennis, we love you and listen, but why do you say, oh my God? You're taking God's name in vain. And I always explain God is not God's name. God's name is Jehovah or Yahweh or whatever. So that's number one. Number two, that's not what that means. And this is what I explain because I know Hebrew. The Hebrew is not do not take. The Hebrew is do not carry. Do not carry God's name in vain. That's not the same thing as do not take. It may be related, but it's not the same thing. Who carries God's name in vain? Those who do evil in God's name. That's the greatest sin. That's the only thing God won't forgive, because if you do evil in God's name, you have made it impossible to tie God with morality, which is what the whole Bible is about. God wants goodness. Therefore, that's why I am certain that Islamic terrorists are in hell, because they commit the greatest sin possible. By the way, those who murder in the name of Christ, the same thing would hold, but that's not happening in our time. So whenever callers say, well, what about the Inquisition? Well, that was 15th century Spain. In 20th century and 21st century West, Christians aren't killing people in the name of Christ. I'm sorry. So why don't we talk about the present day? In the present day, the only murdering in God's name is done by Islamic terrorists. But of course, you can't, you can say anything you want about Christians, but you can't say, which isn't even true, but you can't say what is true about Muslims. I can, because I have a radio show, but I do it anyway, because I do it respectfully. I debated the head of the Muslim Public Affairs Committee at Claremont Graduate School. And he was one of the biggest Muslims in the United States. There were Muslims in the audience wearing headscarves. And the topic was, does Islam need to be reformed? I said yes. He said no. We had a great debate. We respected each other. We went to lunch. There's dinner. And here's the amazing thing. We went to dinner after I said, I think it's not true. It isn't true that Islam is a religion of peace. It has not been a religion of peace. Nobody walked out. No Muslim booed me. Nobody called me an Islamophobe. You could disagree with me or agree with me, but it doesn't come from a place of hate. It's either true or not true. So you can say truths, but unless the left is around. So Christians are still getting it because of the Inquisition. It's amazing. By the way, and how many people were killed in the Inquisition in 300 years? About 2,000. Less than 2,000. Everyone is a horrible, evil death. But it's not what people say. Millions. Go on the internet, you'll see millions. By the way, it's Jewish historians who wrote this. Leo Kamen, K-A-M-E-N, one of the great scholars of the Inquisition. Anyway, the worst sin is evil in God's name. Next to last, penultimate lesson from Exodus. Evolution, not revolution. You want to make a better world, you've got to go slowly. I'll give you an example. There's a law in Exodus that if you have a particularly awful child, a wayward son, as it's sometimes called, and you take him to the elders, that is the court of your city, and if they find him guilty, they will stone him. And everybody uses that as an example of how primitive the Bible is. Actually, I show, and nobody has yet contravened this, that it is one of the great moral advances in history, that law. You know why? The Torah brilliantly took killing children out of parents' hands forever. In every society, parents could kill their children. The Bible brilliantly ended that possibility. Take him to the elders. But we don't have a single instance in Jewish history of elders stoning a kid. So it ended the killing of children. But still under the rubric of keeping parental authority. If it just said you can't kill your child, it would have continued. Same with slavery. Okay, no slaves. Everybody would feel good today. Oh, look, it says no slaves. Instead, it made slavery humane and showed God hates slavery, because the biggest act he does after creating the world is take slaves from bondage to liberty. And finally, there's a law in, I love the obscure laws, because that's why my commentary is worth, it's $23.95 or whatever is being charged. I show the obscure laws have great power, moral power. There's a law that if an ox gores a human, you kill the ox. Doesn't seem right. Was an ox know? You can't hold an ox responsible. Can't, the ox didn't debate. I know it's wrong to kill, but I do have horns after all, so got to use them. Why do we kill an ox that killed a human? To show how bad taking human life is. That's the whole reason. If you killed a human who obviously is not guilty, you have lost your right to live. Now, obviously, if a human does it, and there's a whole series of laws, if it's done by accident, you're not killed, but you do flee to a city of refuge. It's very serious taking human life in Exodus, in the Hebrew Bible. By the way, capital punishment for premeditated murder is the only law in all 5 books of the Torah. The only one. It's one of the only laws in Genesis. So listen to this. I raised this on some show, or I didn't raise it. I don't know how it happened. A woman called, told me the following story. This is what I mean. And it's I put it in the commentary. They had an ostrich farm, her family. And her father was killed by an ostrich. Apparently they kick very hard. I've always had this great love for ostriches, but I don't hang around them since that call, I have to say. I watch videos. Anyway, so the father was actually killed by one of the ostriches. And I immediately said, only because of this verse in Exodus, what did you do to the ostrich? And she said, he's still there. So I said, I'm just curious. So do you tell people, oh, you see, that's the ostrich that killed my father? She said, yeah. And I thought that was disturbing. To me and to the Torah, it trivialized the father's homicide. It's not the ostrich's fault. He's not being killed because it's his fault. He's being killed because he took a human life and shouldn't be just there as a souvenir of the father's death. Hey, there he is, Jerry. Yeah, Jerry kicked that to death. Smashed his head in. I could obviously spend a month with the lessons of just Exodus. But this is why, I just told, it was very touching. I spoke last Sunday night in Phoenix, or a week ago Sunday night in Phoenix, at the opening of a big new Orthodox synagogue in Scottsdale. So they invited me to be the last speaker, which is an honor in Jewish life, because they assume everybody leaves beforehand. And so they stayed. I was touched. So there were a lot of Orthodox rabbis there from Israel, and beards and yarmulkes, and everybody wore a yarmulke, but beards, and I know my Jewish world. It was a very religious crowd, a lot of the people. But I decided at a very early age, Dennis, just say what you believe and let the chips fall where they may. And I got up and I told them at some point, I said, I just want you to know I love the Torah even more than I love God. And nobody fainted, but it's true. I admit it. I love the Torah more than I love God. I have, just like I had issues with my parents, I have issues with God. There's too much unjust suffering for me to easily love God. I admit it. That's why, by the way, I'm going to sneak in a Deuteronomy point, forgive me. Love the Lord your God with all your soul, with all your heart, with all your might. You'll like this point. You ready? What does that law show? Two things. One, love of God isn't natural. Two, God knows it. Doesn't tell us to love our kids. That's natural. Loving God is effortful. There's a lot of pain on this earth. And if you're attuned to it, it ain't easy. But I do love the Torah. His gift, I believe, to us. And if I can get you to love it, it will enhance your Judaism, it'll enhance your Christianity, and it will enhance your life if you're neither of them. That's my belief. I hope this helped. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you again.
So we have about 15 minutes for questions. I believe there's been some cards that have been passed around, or you have cards in your folders. If you have those, Melissa will pick those up and bring those forward. Why don't we just bring up the first group there, Melissa? Okay.
Excuse me, here's a couple more.
All right, thank you. Okay, here's a question. Dennis, the United States may be becoming more Bible-less, as you say, but whose fault is that? You cannot blame secularism or non-believers. They are merely victims of the weakness of modern believers. Agree or disagree?
There's no question that religious people are part of the problem. Of course that's true. But I'll give you a non-religious example. How did the so-called greatest generation, the generation that fought World War II and lived through the Depression, how did they produce the worst generation in American history? My generation. My generation, the baby boomer generation, has more narcissism per capita than any generation in American history. Arrogance, narcissism, America hatred. It permeates my generation. A lot of wonderful people in my generation too, obviously. But there's nothing like it. How did such good Americans produce children who hated America? Because they didn't know how to teach what America was about. What happened is Americans got complacent. Christians got complacent. The assumption was, Hey, I go to church Sundays. My kids will go to church Sundays. My parents went to church Sundays. My grandparents went to church Sundays, so my kids will. Totally understandable thing. Habit took over in Jewish life. We'll just, Jews worry all the time about survival. By the way, for good reason. And one of their worries is intermarriage, because generally speaking, Jews who marry non-Jews, the kids don't end up Jewish. Okay. So as I said when I was a kid speaking to Jewish audiences, you never gave them a reason to be Jewish. Why wouldn't they opt out? You never gave them a reason to be in. You just assumed, hey, I'm a Jew, my parents were a Jew, my kid will be a Jew. It didn't work out that way. So it's true in Christian life, it's true in American life, and it is true in Jewish life. So in that sense, yes, obviously, religious people don't know how to make the case, but I don't fully blame them for it. It just happened, it is. So we have to take the problem where it is, and I'm trying in whatever years God gives me to help solve it. This is my attempt. Because I don't know how you can read this and then say, it's worthless. You may differ with certain conclusions, but I don't know how you would do that. So we have a moral obligation to learn how to make the case for God, for the Bible, for our religion. Otherwise, in a free society, it won't work. We didn't even make the moral case for America, let alone for our religion.
Dennis, this is more political here in California. This question, as a native Californian and conservative, I'm losing hope in our beautiful state. What can I do to get our state back on track? So apparently it's one person's responsibility, Dennis, if you could just give that person that.
Well, you should feel that way, I'm sorry you asked me that question. I don't fully hide it, but I don't dwell on my pessimism. I'm really a happy pessimist. This state, I don't know what to tell. I don't know a way around just the staggering debt in this state, thanks to pension plans. I mean, just that alone. And if maybe Newsom will ruin it so much that people will awaken, but I don't think they do. When the left ruins things, there are two reactions that people have. Oh, we'll bring in the right to fix it up, then the right fixes it up, and then they go right back to the left. This is true all over the world. Or they will say, we don't have enough leftism. That's the other left-wing response. So we didn't do it enough. There's still some freedom. There's still some taxes to be collected. We're not taking enough from citizens like Prager, who are clearly the wealthy among us. After all, I did write a Bible commentary, and you know how much that makes. The old, have Leviticus, get rich. So, look, what do you do? Okay, there are two types of people who do good: fighters and those who help the fighters. Not everybody's a fighter, but everybody could help the fighters. I'm a fighter. Prager University is my example. We'll have 1 billion views this year, and most of them are under 35 years of age. We're changing minds, but we're not changing them fast enough. It's like I feel a race on that issue. By every young person in this audience that I met, I'm not going to say every young person in this audience knows me through PragerU. And I see that around the country. I just spoke in Romania this summer to 1,500 young people in English because of PragerU videos. So you can help us. You can help anything. Is Pepperdine doing good? You help Pepperdine. Is Hillsdale doing good? You help Hillsdale. Is PragerU doing good? You help PragerU. Is Alliance Defending Freedom doing good for religious liberty? You help Alliance Defending Freedom. That you do. We don't expect everybody to be on the front line. But somebody has to help the people. The people who bring the supplies to the guys on the front line are just as important as the guys on the front line. No supplies, no front line. So that's what you have to do. You have to help the guys who are fighting. But California looks very troubled. I acknowledge that. If the weather, if global warming were as terrible as they say, maybe people would leave California. Then it would become hot like every place else. There's no more advantage to living here, and then it would empty out. But whenever I leave California, I think, God, am I lucky to live in California? So it's amazing. I will take good weather and Democrats. No, it doesn't speak well for me. I admit it. I could have crappy weather and Republicans in Oklahoma, but I didn't. I opt for good weather and Democrats. I admit it doesn't speak well for me. It'll be on my tombstone. Prager opted for good weather over values. Okay.
Can you comment on the recent rise of anti-Semitism? Is this just more of the same old hatred, or is it something new and of a particular concern?
The only rise in anti-Semitism is on campuses because of all the anti-Zionism activity, which is a phony word for anti-Semitism. There is no rise in anti-Semitism otherwise in the United States. It's manufactured by the media because they want to blame it on Donald Trump. It's just a fraud. I'm telling you. Read the ADL report is fraudulent. A major analysis by an anti-Trump professor at George Mason University, a Jewish professor, just writing it's a fraudulent report. You remember? I remember. I was on CNN regularly at that time, and I remember how often. Oh, there's a major outbreak of anti-Semitism since Donald Trump got elected. Hundreds of Jewish community centers have bomb threats. So yes, they did. Hundreds of Jewish community centers did have bomb threats. Guess who called them in? 90% were called in by an American Jewish kid with mental problems living in Israel. The other 10% were called in by a black radical who wanted to frame his ex-girlfriend. Not one was called in by a Trump supporter, American, white, racist, nationalist, whatever you want to call it. I went on CNN on Don Lemon's show, said, Don, turns out has nothing to do with Trump. That the whole media lied, which is like saying the media breathed. I'm sorry to say that. It is identical. Breathing and lying come as naturally to the media. Because, and this I say every day, and I knew this when I studied at the Russia Institute, I studied communism. Because truth is not a left-wing value. Equality is a left-wing value. Progress is a left-wing value. Fighting the right is a left-wing value, but truth is not. So they yell at Trump for lying and lying and lying, but there's no comparison. And by the way, this is not true for liberals. Truth is a liberal value. It's not a left-wing value. And I make the distinction every day I broadcast, and in a video and in a column, if you want to look it up. One simple difference between a liberal and a leftist. Liberals believed in racial integration. Leftists believe in racial segregation. Okay? Black dorms on universities is anti-liberal. You can't be a liberal and support a black dormitory. That's pure, undiluted racism. Pure. So if you support it, you're a leftist. That's how you can figure out. Ask your relative. So I'm curious, are you a liberal or a leftist? They'll say, what are you talking about? Same thing. I said, oh, I'll give you an example. Do you think black dormitories is a morally good thing or a morally bad thing? That's your dividing line. I mean, there are many other dividing lines. The video is 5 minutes. The article is 750 words. But there are a lot of differences, and we need to know what they are. Yep.
Last question. We'll end on a high note. How and why should you start your happiness hour?
That's a great question. I know how, but I don't know why. Maybe, well, wait. Oh, yes, I do know. Here it goes. And there is one woman here who has been with me for all these years through University of Judaism and knows this. I gave courses. So, all right, so it's a high story. It's a good question to end with. So listen to this. Let's see. This would have been I moved here to California in 1976. I was in my 20s. So this would have happened, okay, so about 10 years later, I was invited, I was already doing religion on the line, so I was invited by a Chabad rabbi at UCLA, the Chabad rabbi at UCLA. I was invited, he called me up, Dennis, would you come and talk to the Jewish students? I said, oh, I'd love to, and I meant it, I'd love to. I said, so you want me to talk about Judaism? He said, no, nobody will show up. I'll never forget that, it was awesome. So I said, what do you want me to talk about? He said, something light. So I said, okay, what's a light topic? He said, happiness. So this was life-changing. This was an amazing moment. I said, Rabbi, happiness is not a light subject. Happiness is a serious problem. And he said, great title. That's how the title of my book came, from that rabbi's response to my response. It was awesome. So I gave a speech at UCLA, Happiness is a Serious Problem, and I recorded the speech, then it was cassettes. I recorded it on a cassette recorder, and I don't think I ever did this before or since. I listened to my speech that night, because I knew I'm never going to give this again. Nobody asked me to speak on happiness, religion, morality, politics, happiness. So I recorded it, and at that time, by the way, to this day, people subscribe to my lectures. They get a lecture a month from me. So I wanted to see, was it good enough to send out? That's why I listened to it. This is what happened when I listened to it. I remember I was alone, and I was listening to it, and I just kept saying, good point. That is a really good point. I'm going to adopt that in my life. This guy is good. No, I listened like I wasn't the speaker. And I sent it out, and then I was certain that is the end of my doing anything on the subject of happiness. About 6 months later, I got a letter. There were young people here. Letters came in mail. It's very hard to explain. They would be hand-delivered to you. They had a stamp on them. Stamps were things to prove that you paid to send a letter. Anyway, so I got a letter from, it said Red Book magazine. So I thought, they're asking for a subscription. I opened it up, and no, I take it back. I'm so sorry. There was mail, but it was not. No, I got a call. I'm so sorry. I got a call. Dennis Prager? Yes. This is somebody, she had an Italian name. I'm the articles editor of Red Book magazine. I'm thinking, did you want Dennis Prager? Am I the Dennis Prager you want? The articles editor at Red Book? She said, yes. I said, what do you have in mind? She said, I heard your speech on happiness. And I lit up. I go, the articles editor in Red Book in Manhattan heard my speech on happiness? I go, do you subscribe to my lectures? I go, I never heard of you in my life. I didn't even know you put out lectures. But a friend of mine, oh no, not a friend of mine, but I heard you on New York radio. I said, you heard my speech on happiness on New York radio? She said, yeah. I said, what channel? She said, WEVD. WEVD was the Yiddish, English, Jewish station. They're crooks, total crooks. What they did, they could have been fined $100,000. They take a whole talk from someone with no permission and just played it. These crooks changed my life for the better. I hope they are in heaven today, basking in the glory of what they did. So I said, so she said, yes, I stayed in my car. It was snowing out. I stayed in my car till I found out, who is this guy? I got to get in touch with him. To their great credit, at least they didn't say, and what'd you think of that speech from our own Harry Rabinowitz? No, they didn't do that. They said, this guy named Dennis Prager out on the coast, and we'll be back. So she looked me up, found me, said, the speech was awesome. You've got to write an article on happiness for Red Book. So then, it's really a great story. That's why so I said, okay. And she said, is $3,000 okay? I'm thinking, oh my God has shown his glory upon me. And I remember realizing, when I would write for Commentary magazine, do you know what I got for writing for Commentary? 5 free copies of Commentary. That's what they sent. You can give it to your mother, your father, your wife. Yeah, $3,000. This is the 1980s. That's like $400,000 today. So I said, that's fine. She could have said $112. I would have taken it. So I write the article for Redbook. They publish it. Then I get a call from Random House. We'd like you to write a book on happiness. And I remember what I said, because I really am direct. I said, you got to be kidding. I'm lucky I had an article in me. I don't have a book in me. Thank you for calling. But it put a thing in my brain. Maybe I have more to say on happiness than an article. So I decided I'll give a course at the University of Judaism, as it was then known, on Mulholland. And it was 8 90-minute sessions on happiness. So people knew me from the radio. They came. Then I thought, wow, do I have a book in me? 8 times is 12 hours. 12 hours is a lot. But I said, it's not enough. I'm going to give 8. I'm going to give what was this one? 8 course? Yeah, I'm going to give 16 courses. And if I could make 16 90-minute talks on happiness meaningful, I have a book in me. I gave 16 courses, and it's still available, by the way, interestingly. And then I called Random House, or I called my agent. I said, okay, I'm going to write a book. They gave me the advance. I didn't finish the book. I gave them their advance back and ate popcorn for many a day because I had spent all that money. Then I really wrote it. Came out as Happiness is a Serious Problem with HarperCollins in 1999. And this is what I realized. I realized that in working out happiness for Dennis, I came up with a lot of good ideas because I'm no different from anyone in this room. And that has always been my belief. I am just like everybody else. I may think about things more, I may have a gift here or there, but I am just like everybody else, and that has guided my principles in life. If it works for me, it'll work for you. And it turned out to be true. And why did I call it Happiness is a Serious Problem? When that guy called me, the rabbi, and said, oh, a light topic, I was going through a divorce. Happiness was not a light topic when he called me up. It was a very painful topic. Happiness was a serious problem when he called me up. That's why I said it to him. And by the way, you'll find this really of interest, and with this I will shut up. And that is, I have looked at all the pain that I have had, and everybody alive has pain. I've looked at all the pain that I have gone through as a gift to enable me to help others in their pain. Because if I didn't have any pain, I couldn't have written the book or do a happiness hour every week. That is the only reason I can do it, because I've had to deal with these issues. So I am very rational on happiness, just as I am on religion, and the ideas work. And I'm very touched because I published the book. It still sells well on Amazon. And I started at the exact same time, an hour a week on my show. I even did the happiness hour the week of 9/11. And I explained, if I can't talk about happiness when there's tragedy, it's useless. Then I have nothing to say, because everybody has tragedy. So that's a little summation of a great question to end on. It has been an honor to be with you. Thank you very much.
Dennis Prager.
Thank you again. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Make a couple closing thoughts. You can be seated. But this won't take long. First, I wanted to give a shout out to my staff. Nights like this don't just come together, from the scheduling of this auditorium to the signage to making sure you're all communicated with. So much of that was handled by my events coordinator and executive assistant at the School of Public Policy, Melissa Espinoza, over there. So please join me in thanking her. Also on my staff, Cheryl Covey, the Assistant Dean of Administration at the Policy School, Mary Jo Hardman as well, Jacqueline Ramirez, who also checked you in. Please join me in thanking them for their time here. So I just wanted to say a couple things just springing off of Dennis's last remarks. This is a policy school, and who here is your first time at a policy school event here at Pepperdine? Wow, okay. If you're not familiar with who we are, I would ask you to sign an email list in the back just so we can keep you updated on events. I think it's fair to say that there's not another school in Southern California that is hosting events like this. Our next event is scheduled for January 31st. We're going to be welcoming University of Penn Law Professor Amy Wax and Alan Dershowitz to talk about freedom of speech on campus. Our own Dr. Bob Kaufman here in the third row is going to be moderating that event. If you'd like to be on the email list for that, again, January 31st, please let me know. We also have an initiative out of the Graduate Policy School called the American Project on the Future of Conservatism, in which we actually take conservatism seriously and believe it has a lot to say to our politics and policy. If you'd like to know more about the American Project and our work there, again, please sign on our email list, which is at the back of the room. Matt Cutler is our Director of Advancement, is the nice-looking gentleman who looks like Secret Service in the back there. If you'd like to find out more about the Policy School, please see him as well. We are going to have a reception afterwards at the Sandbar. That's just across the plaza here, and so we would invite you to join us for some refreshments as well. And again, just to say how, I don't know how you did it, Dennis, but I think I know how you did it because I've seen you speak before. But to begin with talking about these very important truths, and to close with really the most important truth, which is understanding why we have been put on this earth and why our founders understood something like the pursuit of happiness, which is what we teach uniquely at the Policy School, was not a pursuit of ha-ha happiness. It was a pursuit of happiness classically understood, which is finding our purpose in life and having the freedom and liberty to pursue it. That's what we teach here. Because one of the taglines that we use at Pepperdine and at the Graduate Policy School is that we believe that there's actually a public in public policy. So many of these kinds of programs are very much about policy and about training experts that could then go out and tell all the rest of us how stupid we are. That has never been the case at Pepperdine. When you're founded by people like Kevin Starr and James Q. Wilson and Robert Novak and Jack Kemp and people that were always involved in the founding of our unique graduate school, we were always going to be different, and we are always going to remain different. To the question about are you disappointed or feel bad about the state of politics in California, we're not moving. The School of Public Policy is not moving. We are staying here, and we are going to be a problem for a very long time. Because we believe what Dennis talked about tonight, that there are timeless truths, and these are truths that are that are worth not just knowing, but teaching. As Dennis said, this is not natural. Some of this is not natural. And as our founder, James Q. Wilson, taught us, especially through his book, The Moral Sense, there is a human nature that we have to deal with. But there are timeless truths that we can refer to in dealing with them. And we need more of these kinds of conversations in our policy and politics. And at the School of Public Policy, we will continue to host nights like this. So Dennis, thank you so much for your time. Thank you all for being with us here tonight. And please join us for the reception across the way. Thank you. God bless.